Hi guys, Eva here. Welcome back to my channel, The Inked Reader. I apologize, I've been absent for a couple of weeks, not because actually I didn't have content this time, but because I didn't have time. So yeah, I'm gonna film a bunch of stuff today so I can upload on my channel for the rest of the month. And I'm gonna be in the same outfit again, because I just have today and then no other day in the month to do so. Well, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but more or less it's the truth. So what I'm going to do today is a catch-up wrap-up, meaning that next year my plan is to read each month a book in each of my reading challenges. I've put them up in my channel, in the past months. The last one is coming next after this video, I believe. Well, I should know because I'm the one uploading them. Yes, it's coming up next. So in that way I can kind of have a variegated TBR every month and at the same time tackle all my reading challenges by the end of the year. But what happened is that before I decided to do those kind of format TBRs and wrap-ups for next year, I had already read a few books in some of the reading challenges. And because then I won't have a chance to in-depth review them, because they won't belong to any month, because I've already read them, I thought to do this. So yeah, I'm gonna put up the reading challenge that this belongs to and just tell you about my rating and what I thought about them. This is a challenge, I'll link it up here and down below, where I set out to finish series, because I noticed that I keep starting new series and never finishing them. So I chose series which I just had one book left and then I would be done with the whole series. I've read already 3 of those for now. I should say probably 2. One is a DNF, but we're gonna tackle that in a second. Let's start though with the ones that I've actually read. So the first book was The Tattooed Heart by Grant, I think. I'll put here a picture so you can just read it for yourself, because they always butcher names anyway. So this is a YA, I'd say fantasy to a certain degree, and the premise of this is that our protagonist Mara in the first book is just a duology, by the way. So in the first book, Mara is bullying this other girl and this other girl ends up committing suicide, and all of a sudden this man appears to Mara and says, you can play a game, and if you lose the game you're gonna get punished, and the way you're gonna get punished is that I'm gonna make your worst fear come true, at least in your mind. And she ends up though choosing to work with him instead of playing the game, and as a kind of redeeming herself for what she did. So we've got this kind of entity that works for this other higher deity, and Mara becomes his apprentice. And I think this is highly based on social comment on, you know, how people can be awful with each other, and it's just giving them and just creating this awesome retribution system, if you want. In the second book is pretty much the same as the first to a certain degree. We've got a bit of development of the main character, but it's along the same line as someone committed something really bad and then they get punished, and then you got the social commentary on what's going on, why it's bad, the follow-up. And it's really nice because in basically Mara and this messenger of fear, they follow the victim through their journey of what happened to them after they've been wronged. So that was interesting. So I ended up giving these 3 stars. I enjoyed it for what it was. However, I think if I was younger I would have appreciated more. Now, because I'm an adult, kind of dealing with these topics to a certain degree, not in the depth that I wished, and I couldn't expect this book to go into much depth because of its targeted audience. It kind of felt like it was just barely scratching the surface of what is a very big problem of society, if you want, and human beings in general. So I could not see those flaws. I enjoyed the writing, I liked our characters, and yeah, I think it was a bit predictable the way it ended, but overall 3 stars. I think if you're on the younger side, and you can handle a bit of gory details, because there are definitely a bit of gory details. That's a good one to have. The thing I want to say is, well, this book is mostly showing you. There is not much plot. There is literally you coming along the journey of to see what happens to these victims of these abuses. You don't follow as much the perpetrators, you just get the punishment bit, but there is no plot. It's just our characters following around these other people suffering and telling us what happens. So yeah, there is that element that not everybody might enjoy. The other one that I've read and I finished actually for this challenge was The Anxiety of Calix the Werewolf by Martin Miller. This is a trilogy, so this was the last book in the trilogy. This is an open ending, so I ideally think the author was meant to write more, but never did, and it's been like 10 years, so I think we are good with this. And this is an urban fantasy where in the first one you got Calix. Calix is running away from her family. She's from Scotland, from a werewolf clan, and they're really savage, but she's the savagest of them all. And she is rescued by these two humans that bring her in their house and in their lives. There's a lot of tension between Calix and their family. In a sense, she's royalty, but she's also kind of recluse and kind of excluded. So there's a lot of family feuds going on. And there is also guild of hunters that, of course, wants to eliminate werewolves. So you got all of that. I used to read this when I was a teenager, and I used to love this to bits. This was one of the books that I enjoyed the most, urban fantasy wise, when I was a teen, and I really appreciated it because in this instance we have a female werewolf. She is the bad one, she's the great character, which usually was the opposite back then. It was, you know, you got the creature that is the male, usually broody love interest of our protagonist. In this case it was definitely different. Also the romance is not much part of the plot. There is a bit of romance, but it's really not the main part of the plot. So this was back then definitely groundbreaking for as far as I'm concerned. So one of the biggest questions I had was, will this series, will this last book stand the test of time? And the answer to that is yes and no. I ended up giving these 3.5 stars. I had forgotten how Miller's style is unique, and that can be considered good or bad. He has this kind of silly way to write books, meaning that he brings really heavy topic, because we got our main protagonist who's got health anxiety, self-harming, you name it, drug abuse. She's a mess, and she's been from the first book. And you have so the author dealing with this really heavy topic and doing it in a really silly way, because the majority of the characters in here are really vain, I'd say. So you got, you know, someone cutting their arms in one room, and in the other you got these elementals, creatures that discuss shoes and shopping bags and all of that. And it can be bloody funny sometimes, but it's definitely a style that's not for everybody. I guess I was more into this style back then. Now I enjoy it, but I don't love it anymore. So yeah, I love the characters though. I'm so attached to these characters. I had some good laughs. I'm glad I've done with this. And to be fair, I would probably pick up another book if Miller was ever to write it. But it's still gonna be one of the most loved series from my teenagehood. And although I'm not giving these 5 stars, was not as good as I was expecting, I've still cherished the characters so much. And now the DNF is gonna be a bit controversial. I actually have this book, but funny story. So when this was built, a huge bookshelves that you can see, there is a gap up above, and I was putting that said book up, and it kind of fell in the hole. So that book is currently behind me in the crevices down there, and because these are 2.15 meters tall, there is no way, and they're now joined with screws and nails and all that, is never gonna come out of that. It's gonna stay in there until I buy new bookshelves in probably 20 years time. So the book is in my possession, but it's actually gone, if it makes sense. And please don't hate me. I know that a lot of people loved this book. I want to premise that I absolutely loved this series. It's one of the staple of my teens. I am not a hater. I loved it. I loved the movies for how cringy they were. I'm still there. I still binge watch them now and then, rarely these days, but they changed my reading, those books, when I was a teen. I always read much, but then the urban fantasy kind of opened up and YA opened up because of these books. And I'm talking about Midnight Sun. So Midnight Sun is Twilight told from Edward's perspective. Now, I was never a fan of first books retold in the male perspective. I honestly genuinely think there are very few women out there that can write a book and make it seem like it's actually the story told by a boy. Sorry, I don't think they do it well at all. So I never went for, oh, the first book retold by his point of view. I never gave a shit, honestly. But because this was Twilight and I loved it in my teenagehood so much, I said, well, let's give it a try. So I even pre-ordered it, and then I read 100 pages and I was like, I so do not give a shit about this. And then Twilight became Twilight again from Edward's perspective, and I was like, you're talking about a guy. If it was true, Twilight would have become Twilight, if you know what I mean. Not to hold on prejudices, but I don't need to read 800 pages of the same story that I so much enjoy and know from his perspective. So I'm not criticizing what's in the book or how Edward comes off, because I've not read enough. I was just reading the same again, just more lengthy with more description in that. I don't need that. I didn't have that. I was gonna still keep the book, and then this happened. So I am gonna keep the book technically. Which is a reading challenge where I'm gonna read for each subgenre of fantasy book. I have read just one of those. That was for the category Green Dark Fantasy. I have read The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. Now, Green Dark Fantasy means that it's, well, grim dark, and it means that it's really brutal, bloody, and often you do not follow a hero, but you follow actually the bad guy or a really great character. So that, in a gist, what grim dark fantasy means. I love Joe Abercrombie writing. I have read another series by him before, and then I owned this and I was like, I want to read that so much. And the premise of this is that you follow a bunch of characters and they are on the brink of this war, and you got a character that, for example, is part of these mercenaries, and then they are scattered, he's left alone and he has to travel and survive. And then you got actually people that live in a city that's quite developed for the time, and then you got, you know, the soldier who's a noble son and is just there, you know, to occupy the time basically, and he wants to take part in this tournament, but he's really lazy. He doesn't really want to fight because it's just spoiled. And you follow a kind of inquisitor, and he was my favorite character, and I ended up giving this for 3.75 stars. I unfortunately did not love this, and I know this is gonna get me a lot of hate. I did enjoy it. I did read through all of it. Again, it's a 3.75 stars, so it's not, I'm not saying this book is shit by any means. I just think that my rating reflects a bit of my disappointment though in what I was expecting. First of all, this was not as violent as I was expecting, and this was not as interesting as I was expecting. It wasn't boring because Joe Abercrombie can write so well that no matter what he writes is never boring. But if I have to sit back and judge the plot, the story, it's like, well, that's not just, it's not interesting. And it doesn't mean that it's bad, it's just, in my opinion, it wasn't so interesting. I've heard that, sorry, I've heard that this gets better Other this is more focused on the characters and less on the plot, so you have to be aware of that. I am someone who the plot has to be there. I'm not one of those that are all for the characters. I do enjoy the characters a lot. Again, the Inquisitor, loved this character, loved it to pieces, so I definitely get attached to characters and so on, but I do value the plot a lot at the end of the day, and I just have to come out and admit it. I am a bit more plot driven than character driven. But I think at the end of the day, there is always have to be a good balance. And I think in this instance, the balance was tipped a bit too forward, just characterization. That I will probably continue on one day with the series. I own one of the random follow-up to the series, which I think is standalone. So definitely, if I get my hands on them, beautiful cover, I'll continue on. Yeah. But yeah, it's just what it is, I guess. Challenge where I have to read 10 horror books. I've read a couple of those. This is the horror one, not the Japanese horror challenge. That's separate. From that challenge, let's start on a positive note. The first book I have read was Frankenstein by Grace Grimley. This is an adaptation of the Mary Shelley ones. Because I've read that this is pretty much, apart from some description that's been cut out, apart from that, the original text is what is in here, so I've just missed a bunch of description that were replaced by these, and I'm not complaining. But all the rest, the dialogues and the letters and the bit of description we do get are all from the original text, so it didn't modify the text at all. I loved this so much. I gave this 4.75 stars. I'd never read Frankenstein before, so this was my first experience of it, and now I know why it's so popular. And I know that there are like Team Dracula and Team Frankenstein, but I say no, I'm not gonna choose, never gonna choose, because Dracula is my favorite classic, but this I loved it so much, so much. It can be easily a 5 stars, to be fair, and I think I gave it 4.75 stars just because I just wish we had more, and I think it was kind of abrupt in the end. But apart from that, I loved this, and I think I would have loved it anyway, but the illustration, Grace Grimley, just added so much. So if you're struggling to go through this, I'd say go for it. I've seen a few comments online saying that basically they did not appreciate how Grace Grimley, grim illustration portrayed the story, and it was like, why on earth, when you have the original text that you can read, and you know if you like Grace Grimley or not, because you know, when you hopefully when you purchase a book, you just go through with it, so you knew what to expect. Or maybe you've purchased this because you know Grace Grimley and his style. Why on earth would you go through this if you know you don't like his illustrations? It's just, you know, you're setting up yourself to fail. So anyway, it's just, I'm being petty probably, but I loved it. I think the illustration made it so perfect. The commentary, now I get it. Now I can get the references. Now I get all the movies that reference these, and I'm gonna read these for sure. This is very well beloved by me from the day I've just finished it, and I've read this in one day or something of the sort. I just loved it. And the next one, which is the second and last book that I've read so far, is gonna get me a lot of hate and shit, because I freaking hated this book. And this is House of Leaves by Suzak, whatever this guy name is. This is very well beloved book, and I had heard a premise that was not accurate, I believe, so that's why I was a bit disappointed as well. So the plot is really complicated, but you have this family moving into this house, and all of a sudden in this house corridors start to appear that lead into kind of another house that's all in the dark. Rooms become bigger. Basically, there is a house inside the house, and then you read from multiple perspectives, I'd say. So you got someone who wrote this kind of book script about this family who actually did move in this house and did find themselves in a house that opened up in another house. And then you got a present day, another guy who finds the book written by this guy about this other family in the house. So it was complicated, it was messy. This book, I think there's a lot of hidden messages, which I get to a certain degree. Because if I cannot understand the messages, or I have to go online, and online people are not sure, if the author doesn't explain, this is just theory. There's nothing empirically proven regarding these hidden messages in the book. It's all people thinking, I think this is what happened, I think this is what he was saying. But this bloody 800 pages book or something is full of information which are so fucking irrelevant. I am sorry if you love this book, good for you. I read so many comments of people praising this book, so I understand why. I read those comments, so I understand why these people might have liked that. I'm not criticizing that, but please don't bash on me. Just don't explain to me in details why you loved this book and why it's so clever, because I've read all those comments and I still think this book was shit. I honestly think that this was a painful experience to go through. It was pages, I'm not kidding, pages of informations regarding random shit that did so freaking not matter. If you had to take out the plot, which is the only part of the book that I enjoy, is actually when this family is in the house exploring this other house inside the house. It was full of tension. I wanted to know. It was horrifying to a certain degree. That part of the plot I really enjoyed. But if you could have cut out that, it would be 100 pages book, 150 pages book. And then you got 800 pages instead. They're just there to make you work for it. And I guess a certain degree I like that, but I don't like to the degree that this author went. I freaking hated this book. I am really sorry. Hated this so freaking much. I think why when I read for pleasure, or why do I read a horror for getting a bit spooky weather, I need to spend so many hours of my time reading things at the end of the day are completely without meaning. There's nothing I can take out of that. I'm not even learning, because it's all written down in a really thick, jumbled meta. You don't understand, you switch from one perspective to the other, you don't know who the fuck is talking when. Well, it's just horrible experience. I honestly thought I lost so many hours of my time that I could have just DNF'd it. But the plot of the family in the house, that's amazing. That's really great. I just wish we could cut out all the other crap that at the end of the day comes up to nothing. Nothing, because in the end you don't even have the satisfaction of having a good ending. And then just kept just the family story. There have been so much, and I think that would make this book so much beloved. I'll be really honest. And finally, before I leave you after this long rant, I think when you read this book, and if you don't appreciate this book, people make you feel, oh, you're too fucking dumb to understand the book. And I honestly think that's really offensive, because there are clever books that, you know, you just have to work out a little bit what's going on and then you can get it. And then there are books like this that are made to feel you dumb, and other people use them to make you feel dumb for not understanding them. And then maybe actually at the end of the day, because the author has never expressed any opinion or has not said, oh, that actually is right, you are correct in your opinion, or whether, oh yes, that's what I meant with all that fucking 800 pages of shit. That's my message. It never came out, for what I am aware of at the moment, by saying, confirming. It may be that people make you feel dumb for something that's not there. So it's like when you look, I don't know, have you ever watched a David Lynch movie? You can get it or you cannot get it, but it doesn't make you dumb if you don't get it, because the mind of the author in this instance, or in that case, the director, works in ways that are not understandable. So I would not expect anybody to watch a David Lynch movie like Indian Empire and then when they don't get it think they're dumb. There is a possibility that this director or this author has an image or something going on in their mind that they just cannot convey in a way that it's digestible for everybody. And that's fine. It doesn't make them dumb, but it doesn't make you dumb for not understanding. I don't know, I've experienced working with schizophrenics people, and what they're saying to them make a lot of sense. And to me, it might not make sense. And that's fine. We all agree I'm not dumb for not understanding what you're saying. And I agree that you're not dumb for saying what you're saying because you're believing what you're saying. When books like this are used to make other people dumb, oh, you don't get it, so you are freaking dumb, or maybe there is nothing behind this book, that you've made all of these kind of theories and all of that. I'm not talking about the end and the letter of a mother, no spoilers, but that I get, but all the rest, I'm like, maybe there is no fucking anything that makes sense. Maybe it makes sense only in the author mind, and maybe all your theories are just a bunch of bullshit, because he never confirmed that. He might have thought something completely different when he was writing it. You will never know. So what is the fuss about, if it makes any sense? But yeah, that's it. I'm done ranting about this. Oh, I got shivers thinking about that book. I got rid of that book so bloody fast, and it's also very expensive. So, and from January every month, I'm gonna have like a wrap up for one book in my ending series, one book in the horror, one book in the fantasy, and blah 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 blah. And I'll do TBRs as well. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for coming along and hearing me rant. I'll see you next time. But you're gonna see me in the same outfit because I'm too lazy to get changed for like 5 videos in a row. Thank you for watching. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye.